Hey everyone, welcome to GoLean6Sigma.com's webinar. Thanks for spending some of your quality time with us. We're really excited that you're here with us today. And Lean and Six Sigma are the go-to improvement methods used by lots of organizations all over the world to minimize costs, maximize profits, and develop better teams, all while creating happier customers. So hopefully one of those applies to you. And every month we are crafting webinars just for our global audience and our learner community. And our goal is to really simplify the concepts and tools of Lean and Six Sigma so you can understand them and apply them more easily. So today's webinar is Process Walk Orientation for Participants. I'm Tracy O'Rourke. I'm the managing partner at GoLean6Sigma.com. And I will be your presenter today. We normally have Elizabeth Swan joining us today, but unfortunately she is serving customers, so that's a good thing. And I'm on my own for today, so I hope you don't mind, although I really enjoy having her with me. So here's a little bit about me. I've been in the industry over 20 years. I started at GE Appliances when Jack Welch was there. I was a black belt, and I helped basically GE customers apply process improvement to their organizations. So if anyone had an interest in learning about Six Sigma back in the 90s, I would fly to their organization, tell them a little bit about Six Sigma, and then if they were interested in applying it, I would help them apply it. So I was their free consultant paid for by GE Appliances. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and that's when I decided that I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. Well, I didn't really say it was the rest of my life at that time, but now I really enjoy it. I love what I do, and I'm really glad that it's so interesting still 20 years later. So I'm also an instructor at UCSD and San Diego State University here in San Diego, and I teach the Lean Enterprise program at San Diego State, and I teach the Lean Six Sigma Greenbelt courses at UCSD. So that's a little bit about me. And I live, again, like I said, here in San Diego with my two boys, 14 and 9, and my husband. So a few housekeeping things before we get started. So first of all, during this webinar, all attendees will be in listen-only mode. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have question and answer session. So please feel free to ask questions at any time by entering the question in the question area of the webinar. We'll also ask you to participate in some polls. And if we don't answer your questions during the webinar, we'll be sure to post all of the answers as well as a recording of the webinar and, most importantly, the slides, because most people do want the slides from the webinar. So those will all be posted on the GoLean6Sigma.com website. So first, we're going to ask you to interact. This will be your first activity. And what we would like to know is, where are you from? So go ahead and type in the question window, where are you from? I'd love to see where everybody's joining us today and how late people are staying up. So we have people from Montreal, Quebec. I've been there, Jeremy. I love it there. It's beautiful. North America. John, that is really broad, but okay, I'll take it. Utah, Elizabethtown, Kentucky, Serbia, LA, Gurnee, Illinois, Indianapolis, Vancouver. The land of pleasant living is what Bob has said. Well, I'm really glad you feel that way, Bob. I wonder where that is. I'm sure there's lots of places that are pleasant, and we're happy that you're here. Gulfport, Toronto, Portland, Long Beach, San Antonio, Texas, Indiana, Alaska, Illinois. It's 2 p.m. here. Thank you, Melody. And I actually have a San Diegan on the line as well. Lots of different people. Thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. So why don't we go ahead and get started. So just a little bit about GoLean6Sigma.com. Hopefully this is not your first experience with GoLean6Sigma.com, because I'm really excited about what we're trying to do. We're really trying to make it easy for everyone, everywhere, to build their problem-solving muscles. We provide practical, easy to understand, enjoyable resources for Lean and Six Sigma for learning and application. We really believe that simplifying complex concepts are important, and that complexity just confuses people. So we believe that effective training is practical, accessible, and fun. So we hope that you maybe go through the Yellow Belt training. It takes place at the Bahama Bistro. You get to go to the Bahamas for Yellow Belt training and Green Belt. So I hope you enjoy it if you haven't already. Here are some of the people that we have helped. And you can see that there's lots of diverse organizations here that come to GoLean6Sigma.com, brick and mortar, online, local small companies to large global companies. And there's lots of diverse industries here, such as healthcare, financial services, manufacturing, and state government. And why? Because organizations never run out of problems to solve, and people really need, organizations actually need people that are good at problem solving. So hopefully that's why you're here too. So we're going to discuss something very important today. This is actually one of my most favorite things because I really see the power in process walks. And today's agenda really is process walk orientation for participants. And we're really hoping that if you're going to be participating in a process walk, this is something that you would be able to view and have a better understanding of what process walks are, what they can do for you, what the purpose is, how the process walk will be conducted or should be conducted, and then some ground rules. And also we'll talk a little bit about some of the interview sheets, which is an important part of doing the walk. So those are the things that we're going to be covering in this webinar. And hopefully the idea is that you'll learn more about what you can expect as you participate in a process walk. So first of all, what's a process? It's not a dumb question. It is an important question. And the way we define a process is it's basically a series of steps or actions that create a product or deliver a service. All work is a process, from tying your shoes to baking a cake to getting your airplane, to getting to the airplane gate or getting your lunch burrito. These are all works of process. And we all work in processes. You may be processing an application. You might be fulfilling a lunch order. You might be building a product or delivering a service. But at some point in your day-to-day work, you're probably participating in one or more processes in your organization. So what if the process isn't working very well? Have you ever had that happen? Have you ever had a time where maybe you were stuck in a process as a customer? I can't tell you how many times I've been stuck at the TSA airport, in the TSA line or at the airport, waiting to get to what I really want to get to. And I didn't really mean to diss TSA. Sorry about that. but you know, it's frustrating. I'm sure some of you have been there. Or maybe you've been a defect in someone's process. And that might be on the phone with a financial organization or other, where you're actually stuck in an automated call answering loop that seems infinite. And so those are very frustrating for us as customers. And there's lots of opportunity out there still for processes gone awry, things that could be improved. And often customers can have bad experiences with that. So sometimes, though, it's also painful for the people that work in the process. And so that's where it's really important to have process improvement, because if it's not working very well, what can you do to make it better? So what is process improvement? I really like to say process improvement is any time that you work on the process versus working in the process. And working in the process is different than working on improving the process. So why is this important? Well, many people are hired because they're very good at their jobs and their work. But sometimes we do definitely need to step out of the work and the process that we work in to look at it, observe why something's not working, and try to improve it. And this is an entirely different set of skills. It's different than the subject matter expertise that people are hired for typically. These are skills that are important to build. The skills of process observation, problem solving, and root cause analysis. And this is really what GoLeanSixSigma.com helps people learn. But it's really important to build those skills as well, and we really need to spend time working on the processes as well. Sometimes these processes are very painful, and how do we actually spend the time working on it together to make it better? So if you're actually scheduled to participate in a process walk, the good news is someone has made time for you to work on the process, and you're not working in the process typically at the same time. And it's really important. This is a really important part. Sometimes we just don't make time for process improvement. You know, I hear that a lot, actually. I hear a lot of people wherever we go say, oh, we don't really have time to work on the process. I don't have time to, you know, I'm too busy with the work I have to do. And that's unfortunate because there sometimes can be things that need to be addressed in a process. And if we don't allow people to work on the process, they just get more and more frustrated. And ultimately, we're wasting people's time and valuable resources of the organization because people are the biggest asset of an organization. And we're really wasting their most valuable asset because their employees are basically doing wasteful steps in poorly designed processes particularly. What if we still had square wheels today? You know how hard that would be? I mean, so obviously process improvement has been happening a long time. Even the cavemen did process improvement. And so I like this example because, you know, we all should make time for process improvement. We don't just want to say, oh, we're too busy doing the work. And there's a side benefit to this as well. The side benefit is that you're strengthening the problem-solving muscles of everyone that's participating in a process walk. You have employees who haven't flexed these muscles in a long time, or sometimes have never flexed these problem-solving muscles in this way, from a process perspective. And so ultimately, this is sometimes one of the reasons why organizations implement process improvement. They want people to build their problem-solving muscles because ultimately that is definitely an asset for an organization, to have an entire organization of problem solvers, people that can look at processes, identify root causes, and implement solutions to do it. So ultimately, it's good for the organization, it's good for the individual, as long as we make the time to do it. So let's talk a little bit about what a process walk is, first of all. So a process walk is actually physically walking the process that the thing goes through. So it's sometimes called a gemba walk. Gemba in Japanese means go to where the work occurs. And so what you physically are doing is you're actually pretending you're the thing. You're pretending you're the thing, and you're going to see what happens to the thing in this process. Who does it go to? How many people touch it? What do they do to this thing? And so ultimately, that is what the walk is doing. And ideally, the people that do the process are the people that participate in the walk. So it's twofold. Not only are you walking the process to see what happens to it, but at some point, you're going to sit down and explain what you do to the thing when it gets to your step in the process. So I think people get that confused sometimes. Sometimes they think, oh, we're just going to interview all the people in the process, but they forget to invite them. So ultimately, the people that walk the process are the ones that are participating in the process. They actually work in the process. And the idea here is that you're really trying to build profound knowledge of the current state of the process. What is happening today? What is the process today? And in order to do that, you got to talk to the subject matter experts. We call them SMEs. those that actually do the process. The big proponent of lean is, the principle of lean is involve the people that do the work. And this is a great example of when those people would be involved. And ideally, again, you're trying to build profound knowledge of the current state. A lot of people think that they're walking a process to brainstorm solutions. That's a little premature. You might have some ideas, write them down, but that's not the purpose, per se, of the process walk. The purpose of the process walk is to really understand the current state of the process. Then later, after the walk, once you guys talk about it as a team, you'll identify solutions and implement them later. So we have a poll for you, first of all, and that poll is, have you participated in a process walk before? And here are some of the responses, and I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll, and then just go ahead and answer it. So we have yes, and it was a good experience. Yes, but it could have gone better. Yes, but it was not a good experience. And no, not yet. So I'm really anxious to see this. When I facilitate process walks, obviously I'm pretty mindful of how the walk is prepared, but I have heard of not such great experiences with a process walk, and ultimately, that's unfortunate because it really should be fun. It should actually be enjoyable, insightful, and you should feel like you're collaborating with your team. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And basically what it says is we have a tie. 36% said it was a good experience. Yes, they've done one and it was a good experience. 36% said yes, it could have gone better. I'm really happy to hear that only 5% of you said that it was not a good experience. I apologize. I'm sorry about that. It should be a good experience, actually. And so I always try to figure out what happened and what went wrong with that experience, because it should be good. And then 23% of you said no, not yet. So thank you for sharing. And that is very interesting. So hopefully participating or listening to this orientation will help with moving forward with some of those things. So let's talk a little bit about why process walks are important and what's being accomplished. So one of the very first reasons why a process walk is important is because, number one, some processes are invisible. So some of you are maybe in what I would call non-manufacturing processes or service processes or transactional processes. So it's very difficult actually to see what the process is because you can't see it. It's invisible. It's in people's computers. So when you look at this picture, do you see a process? It's very different than a manufacturing process. If you walk onto a plant floor, you actually see the process right in front of you. You see the products being made. You see where the scrap is piling up or where there might be a defect or where a machine is stopped and it's broken and it's being fixed. Those are all very visible. In non-manufacturing, you can't see the process. How do you know when something's not working? Well, the bad part is usually one of these people in these cubicles blows a gasket because their process is painful, or they're the bottleneck, or they're very frustrated. And we all look at this person and say, what's wrong with them? Why can't they do their job? So it's unfortunate because it could be that the process is designed to bottleneck right where that person sits, but that person gets blamed for being the bottleneck. How many of you have been a bottleneck before in somebody's process? It is no fun. So that's one of the reasons why we do the walk, because that's one way to make the process visible, and you can see the process, see what's happening, see who touches it, see where the handoffs are, see what people are putting in the information. And if you can't see the process, you have to imagine what could happen, right? Sometimes what ends up happening is the process gets designed like this over time. Your process becomes very convoluted, very complex. There's an excessive processing happening, and this is very unfortunate. And so when you look at this picture, what does it make you think of? Does it make you think of a process that you work in? Or maybe you inherited a process that feels like this. Or maybe, maybe people yell at you all the time because the process is designed this way, but you just work in the process. I'm a big believer that people that work in the process are the biggest victims of poor process design. But unfortunately, we blame them. And so really, is it somebody's fault that this process is designed the way it is? No, not really. I mean, most of the people that work in this process are victims. Sometimes people they don't even have the power to change it, or they've been told that they're not allowed to, which is even worse. They can't even fix, their terrible predicament. Edward Deming says that 90% of the problem is the way the process is designed, and only 10% of the time it's the people in the process. And unfortunately, we tend to blame people 90% of the time and look at the process 10% of the time. And that's really unfortunate. So let me ask you a question. If you put a good person in a bad process, which will win? Will it be the process or the person? Well, unfortunately, typically it is the process that wins. And so we can't really blame the people, because if they have to go through this process to get it done, they're going to fall down. It's going to be painful. I like to use the analogy of a junk drawer too for processes. And what I mean by that is processes are like junk drawers. If you don't clean them out every once in a while, you get stuck with a bunch of stuff you don't need. And so processes need to be cleaned out every once in a while too. And it's really easy to just add stuff in processes, surprisingly, but it's much harder to move stuff out or eliminate stuff out of the process and get rid of the things that we no longer need. It's funny, how many of you have seen processes that are automated, but then you discover that the paper process still exists. It's still happening because for whatever reason, people just keep it, whether it's a CYA or just nobody told them they were supposed to turn it off too. So a lot of times, you might see things like that. So think of process improvement as spring cleaning your processes. And so ultimately, that's what we're really doing. And the nice thing is, with a process walk, that's the start of it. You get to see the process the way it is today. So another reason why process walks are really important and what it can do for you is process walks or improving processes can be pretty challenging because every process has 4 versions. What you think it is, what it really is, what it should be, and what it could be. And the issue, and you've probably heard or seen this happen too, is people try to fix processes and they don't actually know how the process is running right now. They'll go and make changes to a process without really understanding what the process what's happening in the process today. And so ultimately, people are often operating under this green, the top left, what you think it is, and they're then fixing the process. But before you can change a process, everybody needs to be in the top right. What is really happening in the process today? What's really happening? And it's very surprising. Most often, people have been working in the process for years, and they still learn something new because they didn't know somebody did it a certain way or this new change happened downstream in the process. So the goal of the process walk is to move everybody from green to the pink, from what you think it is to what it really is. So those are ultimately, that's the process, one of the biggest goals of the process walk. So some people will ask me, what's this what it should be, and what's this what it could be? What it should be is the procedure, the written down procedure that sometimes people don't follow. And I would also recommend not bringing it on the process walk because we don't want to know what it should be. We want to know what's really happening. And if you bring the procedure with you and you ask people, do you do this way? What do you think they're going to say? Yep. And again, this is not a gotcha moment. That is not the goal of a process walk. We're not trying to catch people doing something wrong. We just want to understand what's happening. And it's really important to make sure that that is the context of the process walk. We are not here to go, aha, I saw you did it wrong. That's not the goal. And then what it could be is future state. You might actually get to walk it, realize it's the top right. Wow, look at all those steps. And then later, as you guys work together, you might design a future state. And wouldn't it be cool if we're only 3 boxes? That would be awesome. So having 4 versions can make it challenging to really see a process, and that's why the process walk is so important. And then the last thing that the process walk will do that I'll mention today is process walks are really eye-opening, and I hear that comment all the time from people that do process walks, because we manage people vertically. We have people in departments that report to their boss, and we manage people by function. We manage people vertically is what I say. And unfortunately, that can create what we call silos, right? So we may not have great communication with other departments. And so we manage people vertically, but the thing is processes are horizontal. They work across departments, across functions. And sadly, we don't get a lot of visibility to that horizontal flow very often. So when you do a process walk and you're walking across functions or departments, it can be really eye-opening. As a matter of fact, I've had people say to me, I'm so excited to do this process walk. I've worked in this process for 20 years. I still don't know what Department 3 does. So, and again, they're interested in learning and understanding. And when you walk across departments, what ends up happening is you start to see the redundancies, you start to see what people are doing, and you know what else? You also see what the pain people are going through. And so it really, the process walk does a great job of seeing the horizontal process flow, but it also helps people see what people are going through, and that gets people on the same page. It's kind of a team builder even, I would say, because the empathy does increase. People sometimes are mad at certain departments, and then they see what they go through, and they're like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that is your process. That's horrible. So it can really help people see what people are going through in the process, and it really does raise a little bit of empathy about, gosh, how do we make this better in general for everyone? So that could be a really nice benefit of the process walk. And again, like I said, some people never had the chance to walk the process from start to finish. So I think one of the biggest benefits of the process walk is to build a shared understanding of the current state of the process. Kind of like when you go see a movie together. You know, you actually get to experience the movie together. And I like using this analogy for a process walk because I think the important point about a process walk is you want to see the whole process together. You don't want to break it up. And I almost 80% of the time people go, well, why don't we just break up and then you see this part of the process and I'll go see this part of the process and then we'll reconvene after. That sounds really efficient, but it's not as effective. It's sort of like saying, okay, you see the first half of the movie and I'll see the second half of the movie and then we'll reconvene after. It just doesn't work. They need to go together. You need to see the whole process together. Don't break up the process into pieces. And that's where the ahas come from. So you're actually limiting people's ability to see the whole thing if you do that. So make sure you walk it together. I just have a really quick story about this. So I think sometimes when there's conflict between departments, they don't want to invite the other department, right? I don't want to invite them. And so I go, well, what are you going to do? Go around them? That doesn't work. You got to invite them. You really want this to be a shared experience. The reason why there's conflict is because there's a possibility that you just don't understand what's happening in the process. Neither department has sympathy or understanding of what's happening. So I actually did a process walk in an insurance company, and it was the credit department. They were really having issues with this process of getting new customers set up. And they did not want to invite the people just ahead of them, which was the inside sales group. they said, no, we don't want to invite them. They really didn't want to interact with them. As little as possible was the sense that I got. And so I said, no, this person, you need a representative from this group. If you really want to do a process walk the right way, they need to participate. So literally it was touch and go 2 days before this event was supposed to happen. And, you know, they reached out, and guess what? They didn't want to come either. They're like, oh, great, right? Well, it ended up being a good experience for both sides. The credit department actually discovered how painful their 21-page form was for inside salespeople to complete, and they ended up reducing it to 4 pages. And the inside salesperson discovered when certain pieces of information was missing, how much pain it caused the credit department and the customer. And so they saw what they were doing to each other, basically, and they felt bad about it. And it was funny, at one point in this event, this inside salesperson said, I can't believe you guys haven't killed me yet. And this person in the credit group said, well, we've been trying, trust me. So it was a good learning, and guess what? You know, the relationship was starting to mend, I believe, as part of the process walk, because it was focused on the process and not the people. It wasn't about, you know, hating other people. It was really around seeing what people have to go through as part of the process. So I would encourage you to do the walk and to do it together. So there's lots of benefits to a process walk, as you can already see. Not only is it making the process visible, is what I've shared, and also confirms and busts assumptions, but you also gain an understanding of the whole process. And you really get to see what you didn't know before. You know, often we hear, I didn't realize we did it that way, or I didn't realize we do the same thing, or when did we start doing it that way? Even seasoned people would say stuff like that. So those are some of the things that are some of the benefits of the process walk. So one of the things that is going to happen is, if you've never participated in a process walk, there are some of you that haven't done it, it's really important to enforce what I call the ground rules of process walks. And the facilitator should really be helping do this. And these are really important, and you really do need a skilled facilitator, someone that's not afraid to make sure that people are following the ground rules. And I have to say that, I have actually had to ask people not to participate anymore because they were not following the rules. They were being disrespectful. They were very interrogative. They were, you know, leading the witness, if you will, asking questions and asking them in a way that wasn't very respectful. And so that wasn't good for the group. It wasn't good for the context and the environment of the process walk, and I had to ask them not to participate. That doesn't happen very often. In the years that I've been doing this, I've actually had to ask 2 people to leave, which is not very many people. Most people will abide by these ground rules. So I'm just going to review them really quickly. I always say, and many people that do process walks will say, focus on the process, not the people. It's not about you. It's not about what you're doing wrong. It's not about, are you working hard enough? It's really around the steps that you have to go through and everybody else in the process, because we really do believe that people that work in the process are the biggest victims of poor process design. That's what we're after. And so people should feel safe. They should actually feel not like the fingers coming out, pointing at them, that it's a blame-free environment where they can really say, well, let me tell you what's really wrong with this process, because that's really the goal. And most people won't do that in the environment today because they don't feel safe, or it's a high blame organization or environment. So the goal around the process walk is focus on the process, not the people, maintain a blame-free environment, and a little further down it says finger pointing has no place, and that is correct. I also like to remind people that are doing the walk, you're a student of this process. You're here to learn, to listen, to observe, and really understand the current state of the process. And again, I think sometimes people just jump to solution. They want to solve, which tells me that you're not listening. You're not listening to what the process is today if you're already in solution and you think you already know how to make it better. So be a student, have the the framework and the mindset of a student learning about the process. Be respectful of all parties involved. So again, I mentioned this already, is, when people are speaking, let them finish. Don't interrupt them. Save your questions for the end. Let them finish explaining their process to you. So, ask questions the way a student would ask questions. Be empathetic. So, as I said, it says right here in the ground rules, process workers are the biggest victims of poor process design. And, I actually haven't seen that as an issue. When the process is very painful, I think people naturally become very empathetic for each other. So that's good. So stay engaged, seek to learn, ask questions. Sometimes, in my experience as a facilitator, sometimes people feel like, oh, this isn't that important to me, I'm going to check out. That you're missing opportunities to learn, and if you're not engaged, you're going to miss redundancies, you're going to miss steps in the process or opportunities. Another ground rule, rank has no privilege. So again, there's no decisions happening right now. There's no solutions to be implemented as part of the process walk. So actually rank doesn't have that much credence over this process, because we're just here to understand what's happening. We're here to understand what's going on. I will say this though, sometimes we are interviewing someone in the process and the supervisor talks over the person who is being interviewed. And so I do have to remind people to let the person talk and explain their process. And, again, if the supervisor's not doing the work, sometimes they know they have an idea of what they think the process is, and the process worker is actually doing it. So they know how it's actually happening. So that's just something to point out, is we see that a lot in process walks. People explain a process of how they think it is, but that's really not how it is. And lastly, very important, do not correct the interviewees during the walk. So that goes for anybody walking the process as well as their managers. Sometimes the supervisor's in there and they correct the interviewee. Why do you think that is a ground rule? So I'm not saying don't correct them ever. I'm just saying don't do it now. Don't do it during the process walk. Because if you correct them, first of all, it's embarrassing, number one, in front of a group of people. And number two, how open do you think they're going to be about their process if they're getting corrected all the time? So we really need to see how this process is going, and correcting them doesn't provide the framework to do that. And I'm just going to share another really quick story about when this happened. So I was in a hospital. We were walking a process. We were interviewing an administrative assistant to a doctor, and she was walking us through this process. Now, remember, I know nothing about this process we're walking. My job was to make sure people are following the ground rules for the process walk. So, and again, they knew this was one of the ground rules, don't correct interviewees. So she's talking, she's explaining her process. It seemed fine to me. But at one moment that we were interviewing this person, 4 people looked at me with these really big eyes, like, uh-oh, something happened. And I'm thinking, what happened? They weren't saying anything. They were just looking at me, and I said, write it down. I did this motion with my hand, like, write it down, write it down. So after we interviewed her, we went back to the room to debrief, and they said, well, we actually just saw this administrative assistant make a clinical decision. She actually made a decision that she really actually isn't allowed to make. And it was really the doctor that should be making it. And so come to find out, she did not know. She was fairly new. She worked for a doctor who wasn't around very much, and she was trying to help him, and she didn't realize that what she was doing was a clinical decision. So again, she was corrected, but not at that moment, because we really needed to see the whole process. And is it really her fault? Maybe not. It could be that the doctor never told her. There's lots of reasons why that might be happening. So anyway, we designed the future state, and she was brought in, and later she was told that this was actually part of the doctor's role. And she goes, oh, okay, that makes sense. So it was fine. And so that is an example of not correcting interviewees during the walk, because we really want to understand the current state. Okay, so I have another poll for you. And this poll is, now that we've just reviewed the ground rules, which of these do you think are most frequently tested? So I'm going to go ahead and launch it, and you tell me which of these, focusing on the process, meaning frequently tested meaning they don't follow it. So they're not following it. Which of these ground rules do you think are most often broken, I guess is a better way to say it? That people don't focus on the process, they focus on people. That rank comes in and tells everybody what's going to happen and here's how it's going to go down. That interviewees are corrected during the walk, or that people aren't a student of the process. Which one do you think it is? Ooh, interesting. I can't wait to see what's happening here. I'm just going to wait a little longer. Okay. Very interesting. So I'm going to close the poll and share the results. Okay, so 39% people say focus on the process, not the people. And then that is followed by be a student of the process. Then do not correct the interviewees during the walk, 23, and rank has no privilege, 14. So I have to say you are correct. So 39%, that actually does happen a lot. As a matter of fact, when I show up sometimes for a process walk, sometimes people make it a point to come early to talk with me, and often people will say, but what if it is the person, Tracy? What do we do if it really is the person? Because we so believe that it's their fault that we can't actually get away from that. We go, it is the person though. Okay, so yes, it's true. Sometimes it is the person. Sometimes they need more training. Sometimes they're new. Sometimes they're difficult, whatever it is. But many times it is the way the process is designed. And if it really is a process issue, that is not for process improvement anyway. That is for management and HR. So the idea around process improvement is if we really want to try to improve the process, we need to focus on the process. So you guys are absolutely right. Thank you. We do have, and so this is the one you got to look for the most, is the blame game. People really believing it's about the process and not people. And so this is why a lot of this orientation is around that, is don't blame people. Give people the benefit of the doubt. It's not about the people, it's about the process. So good job there. I'm going to hide the results and we'll continue. So a couple other things that I'm just going to briefly cover that will be covered during the process walk. So one of the other things that we have people look for are the 8 wastes. So these are the 8 wastes. Hopefully you've seen the 8 wastes already. I'm not going to spend a lot of time during this webinar explaining it, but often we will have people look for waste in the process. What are there defects occurring? Is there waiting occurring? Are we producing more than what is needed? So sometimes having a poster handy of the 8 wastes is helpful. If you want to learn more about the 8 wastes, you are welcome to sign up for our free Yellow Belt training online, and it goes through the 8 wastes in much more detail. But it can be really helpful to see waste together as a group, where waste is happening in the process. So you often during the orientation, we also will review what we call the process walk interview sheets. So I give these out to everybody that's participating in the walk, and I give them out in advance. So I want absolute transparency for everyone about what we're going to be doing. It's not a secret. Remember, it's not a gotcha moment. It's not to catch people doing something wrong. It is really to understand the process. So you'll notice, so this is a form. I'll explain this first. It's a form. You basically would fill out a form for each step in the process. So if you have 8 steps in the process, you would actually, as an interviewee or a process walker, you would have 8 of these interview sheets filled out. Now, some people sometimes will interview more than one person for the same step. So let's say you interview 10 people for 8 steps, you'd still have 8 sheets. So it's really designed to be 1 sheet per step in the process. And every individual gets to actually can take the notes. But you'll notice that a lot of these questions on here, they're not about how hard do you work. They're not about, well, how often do you screw up? These are all process related, and a lot of it is to identify and see how long things are taking from a process perspective. It should not be to say, oh, well, how long does it take you to do this? Roughly, how long does it take to complete one of these? It's not necessarily geared towards a specific person. So there is going to be some variation in people's responses. I hand these out in advance. So that people can really understand what we're going to be talking to. So this is a blank sheet. It's free on our website. So you can download it and print them and give them out. So again, if you have 8 steps in the process and 8 people are walking it, every person on the walk should get 8 sheets. So that's what, 64 sheets that you're going to be doing, that you're going to be handing out. And this just shows an example of what it would look like completed. Obviously, these would not be typed, but they would be handwritten in. Often we, hand out clipboards so people have something to write on. And so again, you write who you're interviewing, what the step number is and the name of the step, and then fill out the questions. Again, you don't have to ask every single question. Often I will ask about certain questions, especially for non-manufacturing, around lead time and process time and wait time, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But you can see that you've got data here, how many people work on this step. And again, because sometimes what we find out is, sometimes people get pulled away from a job and they're supposed to have 3 people working on this half time, and you really find out that only 1 person's allocated and they're trying to do the work of 3 others or 2 others. And so is it their fault? No. So again, identifying where there's a shared resource or how much time people are spending on this in terms of their availability is important. And again, not directed towards them, really just management of the process and the work in that step. You'll notice below that these Post-its get filled out sometimes too. These are ahas that people have about the process. You might say, oh wow, I didn't know she works through lunch, or it takes 7 hours to complete this. I didn't realize there was a batch that happens overnight that they can't do anything. So these are just things you discover, highlights of things that you identified during the walk. And we put them there. So I always talk about the definitions of lead time because, again, this is something that we're collecting. This is information that does help us build a map later, a value stream map in particular. But the 3 things that I like to explain is the difference between work time, wait time, and lead time. So we typically will get this information for every step in the process, and it's really interesting because, again, like one of the wastes we know exists a lot in non-manufacturing processes is waiting. The thing is waiting. It's just waiting a long time. So I like to use the example of getting a kitchen remodel to explain the definitions. And I don't know, maybe this might be painful for you. I don't know if any of you have had a kitchen remodel out there, but work time is the time that the person who is remodeling your kitchen is there and billing you for that time. So it's the actual work time. They're there in the kitchen, they're putting in the cabinets or installing the countertops or whatever it is. The wait time is the time during the job that nothing's being worked on. You're waiting for the cabinets, you're waiting for your faucet, you're waiting for the countertops, you're waiting for, I don't know, whatever it is, you're waiting. Because, they might say 3 months, right? But that, he's not going to be living with you guys for 3 months. So the lead time is how long your life was completely disrupted before the job was finished. So that's what we call the total elapsed time. That is lead time. Lead time is work time plus wait time. So what we're doing is we want to capture these for every step of the process. Work time is also known as touch time. And that's, I think, in this next page with the definitions. So process time is also known as touch time, also known as work time. So there's lots of names for it. But I like to say, when you pick this item up, this application, how much you're actually touching it and processing it or doing something to it. How long does it take to put this application into the system? They might say 15 minutes, but it might be 3 days waiting until they have time to do that. And they might be waiting on someone else. They might be waiting on a signature. They might be waiting for approval. There's lots of reasons why it's waiting. It's not the person's fault necessarily. So again, that's also important to make people know is wait time doesn't mean you're not doing your job. It just means the thing is waiting. That's how the process is designed right now. And so that's important for us to know. So we're typically capturing process time, again, known as touch time or work time, wait time, and lead time for every step in the process. And that could be really eye-opening. I will give you an example. So I did some work with LA County, the Register Recorder County Clerk, and if you needed to get a birth certificate by mail, we actually mapped this process. They have a very large county. They get lots of applications by mail, thousands of applications by mail for birth certificates or marriage certificates or what have you. And when we mapped this process, we discovered that the customer was really at this time waiting 8 weeks, roughly 8 weeks, to get their certificate back in the mail. And of that 8 weeks, 6 hours was work time or process time. So that just shocked them. So basically what that said is that it took 8 weeks to do 6 hours of work. And of course, again, we're not trying to make them look bad. I think people even said, well, but we're working the whole time. No, I get it. That's right. There's just, the process is designed to have a lot of wait time in it. So this was actually a quick fix. It didn't take them very long to redesign the process to eliminate the wait time. And they were able to deliver these birth certificates within the same week, 3 weeks later. So that was huge. Getting that aha from the process walk and seeing how long the thing was waiting, and then they redesigned the workflow to make sure that they eliminated the waiting, was huge. And customers felt it right away too. So that's what we mean by process time, wait time, and lead time. And then we have number of items in the inbox, so this also tells us if things are getting backed up. And then also collecting what % of the time are you receiving information complete and accurate to do the job. Because what we find sometimes is people are not getting things complete, and they have to spend a lot of time getting all that information and then waiting for that information to come back to them correctly. So that can be an issue too. And again, we're not saying it's anybody's fault. It's what's happening in the process today, and that's good to know, because then we can collectively work together on what has to be complete and accurate and at what time. So, and I'll share a really quick story about that. Is, the example I shared earlier, which was the credit and inside sales example. They were handing a 21-page form to an inside salesperson to figure out, and basically their % complete and accurate was really low. But what they ended up doing was, instead of just saying, no, you have to fill this 21-page document out, they basically said, well, do we really need everything on this document? I mean, is this really absolutely necessary? And that's when they just decided that they were going to streamline the form. And so they got it down to 4 pages. And guess what? % complete and accurate went up too. So it doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to force people to still use whatever it is. Sometimes there's lots of ways to try to improve % complete and accurate. And so just a couple last reminders about process walks to think through and be mindful of. Do not divide and conquer, stay together. Think of that movie. You're looking for a shared experience. Everybody should see the process at the same time and see the whole process. Also, people are going to have, a lot of variability in the lead times and the cycle times that they want to give you. And I always say, record what happens 80% of the time. 80% of the time, how long does this step take? From when you receive it to when you hand it off to the next person in line is the lead time. And then focus on building profound knowledge and hold off brainstorming solutions, because again, that means you're already trying to solve something while you're learning about it. And so just write those down, but don't necessarily vocalize them just yet. So that brings us to the end of our webinar today. And ultimately, what we covered was what a process walk is, the purpose for doing it, how they're conducted, the ground rules, and the interview sheets. So I really hope that you found this to be helpful. Hopefully that you have a better idea of what to expect when you're doing a process walk. So we're going to open it up for questions, and so if you have a question, go ahead and type it in the question window, and we're going to see if you have any questions. And while we're waiting for you to type in any questions, I'm going to cover a few more things, and then we'll get back to this. So if you haven't gotten any training yet, you can get started with some free training. So we have our Yellow Belt training. It's free at GoLean6Sigma.com. It's about 8 hours, and it's a great introduction to Lean and Six Sigma concepts. We also have Green Belt, Black Belt, and the Lean training for those organizations that are doing Lean only. We also have our next upcoming webinar. It's going to be May 25th. And it's Thursday, and Elizabeth's going to be leading that, and the title of the webinar is How Leaders Successfully Support Lean Six Sigma Projects. So what I find, just to tell you a little bit about this webinar, what I find is leaders typically want to be successful. They want to be supportive of Lean Six Sigma, but they're not quite sure how to be supportive. And so Elizabeth's going to share some of the things leaders can do to be supportive of Lean Six Sigma projects. We also have a new podcast out. It's our Just-in-Time Cafe, and we interviewed Jay McNally from the Seattle Children's Hospital about their Lean tours. They actually have a lot of tours that they take people through, so you can see how Seattle Children's Hospital is implementing Lean in their organization. It's very exciting. So let's start off with some questions. Oops. Let me go back to this. And so this is where I really miss Elizabeth, because she would have me go through some of these questions. So Carlo, I don't know if you have any questions for me. I do see a few on here on the question answer, not too many, so that looks like it's manageable. So during a process walk, would it be okay to have a blue card paper to hold it up if someone starts to stray from the ground rules? You know, you could. It's great visual management, and it can be helpful. Sometimes what I do is I immediately after the interview, I will say something to them, or I might reword what someone says. As an example, a big question people always ask is, why do you do it that way? It sounds harmless, right? It actually triggers people to be defensive. So I actually reword it in the moment. I say, so what we really mean is, why is the process designed that way? It's a very simple thing, but it's really important to make sure that you don't use the word you and your finger to point at the person. And so why is the process designed that way is a better question. All right, I'm going to go through and see if we have any other questions here. Do you share the ground rules with the actual interviewees as well, or just those doing the walk? Absolutely. So because I want them to know that this is how the process walk will be conducted. They should feel safe. So as a matter of fact, you know, when I do an orientation for a process walk, I will bring the interviewees, the walkers, and the stakeholders all together for 1 hour. If I'm doing an orientation live, I'll bring them all together. It's usually like the kickoff. And so then we have the champion, and then I walk through all the ground rules. And then obviously stakeholders aren't always walking the process walk with us. So they'll leave, but at least they know what the ground rules are too. But absolutely, it's pure transparency when it comes to our process walk. Be transparent about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that will help make people feel safe. Let's see. A few more. How many people typically attend a process walk? Is there an ideal number, and what's too many? Great question, Scott. So when you're walking the process, so a lot of people think, well, it's a non-manufacturing process. We're just going to walk to a bunch of cubicles. Do we really need to do that? Yes, you do. And I will say this, though, having more than 10 people do that can sometimes be a little, not disturbing, but crowded, let's just say. So I say once it starts to creep up to more than 10, including myself, I start to really question who they are and what they do in the process. Because if, you know, we're going to interview 3 people and they want to all do the walk at the same time, sometimes I'll have only 2 people or one person go, because it's more manageable. So I'd say more than 10 starts to get a little unwieldy. I will say, though, sometimes people get really excited about going on the process walk, and I had 20 people show up once, and I had to turn them away, unfortunately, because that makes people feel like they're in a fishbowl, too. So you have to be careful of that. Okay, another question. Do you notify the staff that will be observed during the process walk beforehand, or is it better to just show up to ensure you see what really happens? Okay, so I would say that the approach of just showing up to see what really happens feels like it's a gotcha. And I absolutely feel like they need to know what's happening beforehand because that doesn't feel safe. So yes, they need to know who's going to be interviewed and when they're going to be interviewed. And you know what? I know what you're getting at. You're like, well, then they're going to lie. Well, not always. I mean, if they feel like they're going to get blamed, yeah, I'd lie too. But if they feel safe, you'd be surprised at how people respond to that because they know that they're not going to get, in trouble or in a gotcha moment. Should the process walk, this is from Jeremy, should the process walk be done during the measure phase of DMAIC? I usually do it in define. So before we do the map, I will do a walk. So I'll do a high-level map to help organize the walk, but then we'll do the walk, and then one of the things that we do almost immediately after the process walk is to map out the process, and we sometimes will do a value stream map or something like that. So, so hopefully that will help. I love process walks because I see the power in them, and it does take a little while to learn and how to do them well and in a way that people enjoy it. It's fun and it's good learning and it's a team builder. So hopefully this will pique your interest. We've got lots of training online if you want to learn more about them in our yellow belt, green belt, and black belt training. We are out of time, folks. I hope you enjoyed our webinar. If you have any more questions, please contact us at golding6sigma.com. Don't forget to download our free tools and templates. If we haven't answered your question, we'll be sure to answer them on our website. Thanks for joining us and have a wonderful day.